Bodywork, working with the body, it's a simple thing. We're going to deliberately do really simple exercises, not to be primitive, but so that in this simplicity we can actually observe some internal connections within the body. And the goal, again, is not to build up something on the outside, not to increase flexibility, not to bulk up the muscles or anything like that, but on the contrary, to renegotiate some internal connections, to become more precise within the boundaries we already have. And again, quite often we do a lot of repetitions of these simple, basic patterns. And with each repetition, again, it's not about doing it 10 times and that's it, but with every time we try to clarify something, to allow something new. The idea is always to let go of unnecessary tension. That's the logic behind it. Again, we'll be lying down on the floor pretty soon, so if anyone needs to put something under themselves. The session lasts about an hour. Let's go. Let's sit down. And again, keep your legs straight. So here we are, sitting with our legs stretched out in front of us. And right from the start, let's try to let go of the idea of having some special posture. That idea of keeping your back perfectly straight. Instead, let's try to allow ourselves to really sink down to the floor. Feel that you have a torso, and more specifically, inside there's your spine, which is sinking down into your pelvis. Try to allow yourself to do this, yes, without forcing yourself to look pretty or to straighten your back or anything like that. But now, as you stand, and this sinking of the spine toward the floor, the spine dropping into the pelvis, let's think about how this sinking doesn't restrict our breathing. Let's place both hands on our stomach, on the lower abdomen, about 2 hand widths down. Just observe, without forcing your breath in any way, without slowing it down, without making it deeper or anything like that. Just think about how, as you inhale, the front wall of your abdomen gently expands. That is, the internal organs move freely when the diaphragm goes down, and our belly rises and falls. This idea that the stomach has to be flat or toned all the time. Instead, we just allow the lower abdomen to gently fill on the inhale, and on the exhale, let that vacuum form naturally as the belly relaxes. Just observe your breathing, with your hands on your stomach, and notice how letting your spine drop to the floor actually blocks your breath. At the same time, make sure you're not holding yourself up with your hips either. You can even bend your knees a little, right? And see how little you can bend your knees so that you feel the least amount of tension in your thighs, or ideally, none at all. In other words, once again, try not to clench with your thighs. And now take a couple more breaths in and out, focusing on your lower belly. Now gently place your hands on your chest, with your fingers pointing forward. And just like before, without forcing anything, without making your breath deeper or deliberately more correct, simply observe that as you inhale, you're not preventing your chest from expanding outward. Again, when we say expanding, we're talking about the very first moments, just the tiniest movements, just a few millimeters. And on the exhale, calmly, the chest deflates back toward the center, toward the spine. In other words, our chest isn't locked up or rigid. Just literally observe this for a moment. The palms are more like a tactile marker, meaning that through touch, we invite our attention to the chest area. Again, we're not giving the body, the breath, or ourselves any extra tasks or instructions. Just observing is enough for something to start happening. And right on the inhale, the chest, bam, becomes rigid, like concrete. Again, we can hold onto the image that the palms are gently melting this film around the chest. And on the exhale, the chest is also permeable, it deflates. And one more time, with natural breathing, a natural inhale, a natural exhale. And at the same time, we make sure that this action hasn't blocked our abdomen. In other words, this permeability of the chest doesn't squeeze or constrict our lower abdomen. It's not one over the other, but everything working together. Place both palms on the thighs. Again, you can always choose to slightly bend your knees, just enough so you barely feel any tension in your legs. Now gently, Just while standing, point your fingers toward your feet and gently, from the hip joints to the knees, invite your thighs, these outer thigh muscles, to relax and deflate. So instead of having that hyperbonus and holding, as if your thighs are like inflated parachutes or domes, we're doing the opposite. We're letting those domes deflate by inviting them to relax, not by forcing them. And again, this isn't really about massage, but more about sending a message of calm to your nervous system. Hey guys, legs, we can manage without you. Gravity is enough. Our anatomy is enough. And one more thing. Right before we go down, place one palm on the front of your neck and the other palm on the back. We're also creating a kind of tactile tube here. Again, no, the point here is not to choke yourself in any way. And once more, don't force your breathing. Just focus on the idea that as you inhale, air calmly passes through this tube, whether you breathe more through your mouth or your nose, whichever feels more natural. And in this tactile tube, there are no obstacles, no extra bends or kinks. Of course, there's a natural curve in the cervical spine, but nothing extra is happening there, especially in terms of any muscular holding. In other words, the air moves freely through this tube. For now, keep your palms on your neck and notice whether your hips are puffing up again or if you're not inflating domes, holding, or tensing up. The lower abdomen is relaxed, and the front surface, the front wall of the abdomen, moves freely as you inhale, while the rib cage remains open and permeable. Gently remove your palms and try to keep your attention on all three areas: the neck, the open rib cage, and the hips. And gently start to open your legs at the knees and hip joints, and actually point your fingers toward your hip joints. Now, from the outside, it might look like we're just bending our knees, but in reality, we're opening up the hip joints. And just stay in this position for a bit, noticing how much this doesn't interfere with your lower belly filling up as you inhale, your chest remaining open and expanding to the sides, your neck letting air through freely, and your thighs not turning into a dome. In other words, you need to renegotiate all these actions with your body. Honestly, that's already a ton of things to focus on. Again, the goal is not to demand too much from yourself. There's definitely no need to insist on keeping your back perfectly straight. We're renegotiating with gravity. And there's a slight vertical circulation. And we're noticing that we have mobility in our knee joints and mobility in our hip joints here. The hip joints are like little balls that easily rotate the top part of our leg. And the knee joints, each knee joint is like a set of rails. And we're really picturing the leg moving freely along those rails. And the more precisely our leg moves along those rails and rotates through the hip joints, the less tension we hold in our thighs. Remember those domes. There's really no reason to puff up those domes or do this movement using the leg muscles, using the outer muscles, right? Focus more on the inner muscles. And really try to retrain your mind and body and your nervous system. This mobility in the hip joint, mobility in the knee joint, relaxed outer muscles in the leg, and your breathing. On the inhale, your lower belly fills up, and your rib cage expands outward. Again, not by forcing it, but by allowing it. And nothing is restricting your neck area. Let's stay in this position for just another half a minute. For some of you, this might already feel pretty intense. Again, you might perceive this as being forced, like, damn, having to sit here straight. But again, just a little bit, yeah, even if we feel some tension building up, that's actually a reason to direct our attention there and try not so much to endure it, but to renegotiate with it. How can I adjust the way my spine is positioned and this mobility in my pelvis? And literally for the last 15 to 20 seconds, while continuing this pattern in the legs, let's think about how the hip joints are rotating more and more inside the pelvis. And now the spine is not just dropping straight down, not just toward the floor, but it's evenly distributing this descent between the right side of the pelvis and the left side of the pelvis. And the right side of the pelvis transitions into the right hip joint, while the left side of the pelvis transitions into the left hip joint. And again, place your palms on your thighs and simply check that your thighs are not experiencing any tension. We keep doing this. And now, while maintaining this pattern in your legs, hips, and knees, gently invite your tailbone toward your heels. Just the very beginning, right? The tailbone engages the sacrum and the spine, and we start to gently lower down, up to the sacrum. Keep the action in your legs, with your knees pointing up toward the ceiling. The idea is to go through this movement as thoroughly as possible until we reach the sacrum. And when the sacrum is on the floor, try to keep your shoulder blades off the ground. Again, for some people this might already be a very challenging, though minimalist, movement, but let's stay here for a bit anyway. So, ideally, the sacrum is on the floor, the lower back is no longer on the floor, right, the shoulder blades are definitely off the ground, and the head is forward. And here, check your hip joints and knee joints. And you can gently place your palms on your abdomen again and see to what extent you can avoid tensing your stomach and maintain this mobility in your breathing. And once again, gently start moving forward, leading with the tip of your nose. The idea is, again, to minimize external tension, renegotiate with your internal muscles and connections, and move forward. We'll do this 2 more times, and eventually, we'll end up on the floor. And again, the goal is not to straighten your back. And now let's try not to go down to the floor with the lower back, but instead, when I say the number 3, on the count of 3, invite your tailbone toward your heels, as if someone is pulling you by the tailbone, by the lowest bone of your spine. The tailbone will invite the sacrum, and the sacrum will then invite the vertebrae. 1. And when you hear 1, check that your hip and knee joints are not locked. 2. And when you hear 2, just make sure your breathing hasn't become restricted. The lower abdomen is breathing, the chest is open, and the neck allows air to pass through. 3. And again, with the tailbone, focus on your own detailed sensation, not someone else's, not how you think it should be. Maybe there's no idea of something perfect here. It's just about today. We work with what we have today, moving down to the sacrum. And here, check that your thighs are not locked up. The tip of your nose reaches toward your toes. And place your palms on your thighs. Here, check your thighs aren't holding any extra tension. Don't puff up the tops of your thighs. Your inner muscles are enough. The hip joints rotate, and the knee joints guide you along the rails. Now place one palm on your lower abdomen and try to minimize any tension in your belly. Again, do this as much as possible, even if it's just at the level of intention. Place your other palm on your neck area. This pipe again. And it's clear that, most likely, there's some holding or tension there. Just try not to create more tension than necessary, more than you have to. Again, maybe I'm saying this in a way that sounds a bit too idealistic. Of course, it's clear that many of us really do feel this tension. And again, lead with the tip of your nose forward and try to renegotiate with your pelvis, renegotiate with your spine, renegotiate with gravity, renegotiate with your muscle actions, so that you don't rely on a jerk, or at least minimize that jerk. And right before we go down for the last time, and we'll stay on the floor, think about whether this habit of moving your hips and your knees, of doing it with your outer muscles, is already starting to form over time. Let's try, once again, to give ourselves this mental instruction that the outer muscles aren't working, as if your legs are doing it all by themselves. And again, on the count of 3, 1, and as you hear these numbers, 1 and 2, try not to feel or add any extra tension at all. Again, it's our concept that it's important to prepare yourself for action, but to prepare by increasing your attention, not by increasing how much you're holding or tensing. 2, 3. And once more, give yourself as much time as you need, paying close attention to your tailbone. The goal is not to end up on the floor as a result. The goal is to go through this process in detail. And move on to the sacrum. And from the sacrum, again, lay down the spine as thoroughly as possible. Then lay down the back of your head and let your legs continue this movement at the hips and knees. Left knee joint, right knee joint. And keep alternating, repeating this process over and over. And now let's think again about how attentively we can approach this pattern, not just as some random shaking, but with each repetition as we clarify these connections or, if you like, use some romantic imagery, as if our goal is to shake loose or turn the page on some extra holding or tension. And again, place both palms on your stomach. The leg maintains this movement. And check that your sacrum is touching the floor. Your lower back is slightly above the floor. There's no need to create arching in your lower back. And let's imagine that the sacrum is melting into the floor. And now, any movement or effort from working with the left leg or the right leg, we direct into the sacrum. And the sacrum, in turn, transfers the disturbance in the body from the actions of both legs into the floor, not into the lower back. And again here, if anyone has lost focus on their breathing, let's bring it back. And we observe that as we inhale, the front of the abdomen expands. And at the moment when the front of the abdomen expands, just keep in mind that this front surface of the abdomen is not pulling the lower back along with it. In other words, on the inhale, it's specifically the front wall of the abdomen moving toward the ceiling, while the lower back remains relaxed and gently sinks toward the floor. And any kind of disturbance, holding, or tension that might arise in the legs, abdomen, back, pelvis, or glutes, we try to redirect our attention to the sacrum. And our sacrum is melting into the floor. This means that any tension accumulates in the sacrum and then spreads out across the surface of the support. Just observe your breathing. Now, when you hear the count of 3 again, instead of moving alternately, your knees will move in the same direction, okay? Both knees go up, both go down. Remember, when you hear the count of 1 and 2, think about not blocking your breath and not letting your outer muscles tense or feel extra strain. But our focus will increase. 1, 2, 3. And both knees go up and down together. Minimize holding or tension in your thighs. Keep checking whether your knee joints are still moving freely. And now, place both palms on your gluteal area, one on the right side, one on the left, and think about making sure your glutes aren't holding onto tension, or at least are minimizing any holding. So, any potential for accumulating tension, we redirect it from the legs and glutes into the sacrum. And then the sacrum melts that tension further down into the floor, into your support. And here, again, check whether you're holding your breath or tensing your abdomen unnecessarily. As you inhale, the front wall of your abdomen gently expands upward toward the ceiling, and as you exhale, it calmly sinks down toward the floor, closer to your lower back. And there's this sense of separation between your lower back and the front wall of your abdomen. So again, for those who like to overtrain their abs or something like that, notice that overdeveloped outer muscles shouldn't be pulling or yanking your lower back along with them. And to this area of focus, the sacrum melting into the floor, we add the shoulder girdle. Now, imagine that the shoulder girdle is like a line stretching from your right shoulder to your left shoulder. And picture this line as if it's also glued to the support, stuck to the floor. So now we have a kind of triangle. That's the shoulder girdle and the sacrum. Just a reminder, your legs are still working at the hip and knee joints. I keep bringing up this idea. What if you could use even less effort in the muscles of your legs and glutes? Even if right now you're thinking, wait, how is that even possible? We keep trying, always refining as we go. And this triangle, the sacrum melts into the floor, the shoulder girdle melts into the floor. And let's think about how the inhale doesn't, so to speak, disrupt this triangle, doesn't break the contact of this triangle with the floor. On the inhale, remind yourself again, check, the front wall of the abdomen fills calmly, without pulling the lower back. On the exhale, the front wall of the abdomen gently moves down, settling. Now, let's remember again how we placed both palms on the rib cage, and once more, place both palms on the chest area. Let's bring back that tactile sensation. The knees are working, the hip joints are working. We won't be doing this for the whole hour, so you can give yourself a little more of this resource, and think about how, on the inhale, the rib cage opens up to the sides, expands, and becomes more permeable. And on the exhale, once again, the rib cage closes in, drawing toward the center. And if, on the inhale, the lower abdomen is working vertically in relation to the floor, then the rib cage is working horizontally. Observe these two phenomena and notice how one does not cancel out the other. On the inhale, the lower abdomen fills up, while the rib cage opens out to the sides. Again, not as some kind of forcing, not as some external effort, but simply not holding the rib cage in from the inside. And on the exhale, on the contrary, the rib cage draws in toward the center, toward the spine, horizontally in relation to the floor, while the lower abdomen drops back toward the lower back, again toward our supporting surface. Keep observing this, and once again, there should be no increase in the arch of the lower back. This triangle we've identified, the shoulder girdle melts into the floor, and the sacrum melts into the floor. Let's really check what's going on with our right shoulder joint, our left shoulder joint, what's happening with our right biceps and triceps, and our left biceps and triceps. Do we have any tendency to hold them above the floor, right? As if we're slightly keeping them up using our own effort, our own tension. And let's try, using this triangle, the shoulder girdle and the sacrum, to really allow the right and left arms to rest on the floor, to sink toward the floor, not to hold the right shoulder above the floor, not to hold the left shoulder above the floor. And now again, when I say the count of 3, both knees will go up so that your feet start to move toward your pelvis. 1, 2, 3. And this circulation in the knees and hip joints continues. But at the same time, the knees gradually start to rise. And at this moment, check whether you're starting to shift the tension into your lower back. And is your lower back starting to tense up or overarch? Any tendency to hold tension in your knees, hips, glutes, or any tension in your back, redirect all of that into our triangle, the sacrum and the shoulder girdle. In this position, the hip joints and knees are circulating. Feet are above the floor, toes lift up and lower down. The whole time, it's as if we're directing our knees, pressing through the heels, toward the crown of the head. The toes lift off the floor and come back down. It's really a back and forth movement, back and forth, there and back, there and back. So now, to the hip joints and knee joints, we've added the ankles. Just imagine, again, it's not exactly like this anatomically, but for the sake of visualization, it's enough. Between the foot and the lower leg, there's also this kind of little ball inside. And the foot can actually rotate freely around this little ball as well. There's a bone there. It's not exactly spherical, but again, for this exercise, imagining it as a ball is enough. So, our legs can freely rotate in the hip joints, knee joints, and in these little balls in the feet. And here we check, right? Because we're starting to feel this vibration, most likely in the torso and in the head as well. Have we shifted the tension to the glutes or to the thighs? How much can we really let go of that tension into the sacrum and the shoulder girdle, into this triangle? And are we starting to hold ourselves slightly above the floor, so to speak? On the contrary, we melt the sacrum, we melt the shoulder girdle. Are we starting to hold our arms above the floor? Are we starting to hold our back above the floor? Or are we tensing our pelvis just in case? Or maybe keeping our left or right leg in some extra tension just in case? And now, when I count to 3, we'll stop the vibration so that both feet remain on the floor, close to the pelvis. Both knee joints will be facing the ceiling. But for now, let's check. Are we starting to hold tension in the lower back? Is there any blocking in the abdomen? On the inhale, on the exhale, is our rib cage still expanding and contracting as we breathe in and out? Are we experiencing a buildup of tension in the calf muscle? Any of this, any attempt that leads to tension building up in the legs, we redirect into the mobile joints. So, we have 3 zones through which this tension can be released: the hip joints, the knee joint, which works like rails, and the ankles, the balls in the ankles. These are the 3 degrees of mobility through which tension can be released from the body instead of accumulating in the outer muscles. And we have a triangle, the sacrum and the shoulder girdle. And we have one more point to this, the back of the head. Most likely, the back of the head is also now shifting a bit toward the crown, toward the pelvis. Now, this area, yes, each time we refine the contact between the back of the head and the floor. With each movement, when the knees go slightly toward the crown and back, we feel this rocking motion. And let's think about how this rocking, this gentle, soothing rolling on the back of the head, can also be an area where tension is gently released. And, for example, this means that we can let go a little more, allow ourselves to relax the lower jaw, especially if we check how much tension we're holding in our skull, in the area just below the lips. In other words, how much can we shift that holding into this rolling motion? How much unnecessary extra tension or accumulation of stress do we have in the forehead area? And let this gentle rolling in the back of the head also neutralize, yes, smooth out that tension. Again, as a kind of lyrical image, it's like we're rolling out dough, right? There's a lump of dough, and little by little, by repeating back and forth, we turn it into a thin layer. Let the area of the lower jaw become thinner. Let the area of the forehead become thinner, and let the area around the eyes become thinner as well. And one more time, before we stop this vibration, let's check our breathing. The chest opens up, the shoulder girdle melts into the floor, our triangle, the sacrum melts into the floor instead of holding tension in the glutes, the back of the head melts into the floor instead of holding tension in the facial or head muscles. And in the same way, let's add this free movement of the neck to our breathing. And here, remember the neck tube, yes, the tactile sensation when we place both palms on the neck. On the inhale, calmly let the air circulate there, it passes into the chest. On the inhale, the chest opens out to the sides, horizontally. And in the same way, on the inhale, the lower abdomen fills the front wall upward toward the ceiling so that the organs can calmly move toward the pelvis without being stressed. Against this background, the legs don't feel any tension, or we minimize it as much as possible. Instead of pushing the thighs and glutes into the hip joints, we rotate them. Instead of holding yourself in the hips and sides, open up the knee joints and imagine little balls in your shins. And as a reminder, when I say 3, we'll stop this vibration. 2. And again, there's no external effort involved. 3. And your feet are on the floor. Just observe the residual sensations from these vibrations. Obviously, we're doing some super basic, minimalist actions. But for the nervous system, for the system of sustained attention, this can feel like a pretty significant event. Let's just allow our psychophysiology, our nervous system, to absorb and integrate this experience. At the same time, once again, keep observing your breathing. The sacrum melts into the floor, the shoulder girdle melts into the floor. Check if there's any extra tension in your hands, the back of your head melts into the floor. As you inhale, the front wall of your abdomen and your rib cage expand outward. Breath circulates calmly along your neck. Now, as we continue allowing ourselves to integrate this experience from the vibrations, notice if there's any tension in your legs or hips. Now our left foot, in the same way, becomes a support, another grounding point. The sacrum, shoulder girdle, back of the head, and left foot melt into the floor. And we gently start to move the right foot. Again, by rotating at the hip joint, the knee joint, and the shin. Now we're looking for a more optimal position for the right foot, so that the tension in the thigh and glute muscles is minimal or even completely absent. And we keep shifting the right foot like that. With every movement, every shift, we pay close attention to how much we can lift and lower the leg without arching the lower back. Again, we're only talking about tendencies here, yes, when we talk about minimalism. Not by tensing the thighs, not by tensing the glutes. Pay special attention to lifting the foot and special attention to lowering the foot. Now let's think about it. Let's all lower the foot. And again, when I count to 3, we'll lift it just barely above the floor. But when we start to lift it, let's think about pressing the sacrum even more firmly into the floor, pressing the shoulders even more firmly into the floor, pressing the left foot into the floor, and pressing the back of the head into the floor, rather than tensing the glutes or the thigh. 1, 2, 3. Press all these areas into the floor, and as a counterbalance, the right foot hovers slightly above the floor. Stay in this position for a moment. The right foot is above the floor. And again, pay attention. Make sure that holding the foot above the floor doesn't lead to extra tension in the thigh or arching in the lower back. Maybe the hip joint is starting to get compressed, or maybe your breathing is becoming restricted, or for some reason you're suddenly starting to arch your neck more. And on the count of 3, gently and calmly place your foot on the floor. 1, 2, 3. And the foot moves toward the floor. And really check that this doesn't cause your lower back or neck to collapse, or make you hold your breath again. So this isn't relaxation in the sense of just falling apart, but rather a kind of reorganization. Now both of our feet are melting into the floor, right foot, left foot, sacrum, shoulder girdle, and the back of the head. And now we'll do the same thing with the left foot. When I count to 3, the left foot will lift off the floor. We'll do this not by increasing the arch in the lower back or neck, not by tensing the outer muscles, and not by holding our breath, but by refining the contact with the floor in those areas we mentioned earlier. 1, 2, 3. And the left foot gently lifts above the floor. Now let's really observe what's happening with our breathing. Do we notice any habits or patterns in the body, like tensing or tightening the stomach for no reason, just in case? Or maybe slightly tightening the chest for no reason, just in case, or holding a slight arch in the neck, just in case, you never know. Let's try to make a new agreement with ourselves that in this situation, there's really no need for any of that just in case tension. And 1, 2, 3. And gently place your foot on the floor. And now again, on the count of 3, the right foot is above the floor. 2, 3, without any external effort. The right foot ends up, continues to end up under the floor. Carefully, starting from the fingertips, begin to direct your fingerprints toward the ceiling. Both the right hand and the left hand are perpendicular to the floor. Just stay in this position and observe. Again, check if you're starting to hold your breath, or if your right thigh is starting to support your foot. And, keeping your right foot above the floor, just stay in this state, where your fingerprints are stretching out, straightening. Again, you might imagine dough, or maybe the image of molding, as if your fingerprints want to shape or blow hot glass from your hands. Little by little, your arms lengthen, becoming straighter. But not because we're tensing our arms with external effort or forcing them to straighten. On the contrary, the arms are growing upward toward the ceiling from within, but at the same time, the right shoulder joint drops toward the floor, and the left shoulder joint drops toward the floor. In other words, the shoulder joints don't lift off the floor, and moreover, they're not being held in place by external muscular tension. There's a constant dialogue. The fingertips are inviting the arms toward the ceiling, while the shoulder joints and the muscles around them are inviting the arms toward the floor. Again, we can imagine it's like melting plastic, stretching both toward the ceiling and toward the floor. And again, it's more from the inside. In other words, we shift more of the work in the arm muscles to the inner muscles, while the outer muscles are set up for conductivity. The right foot is above the floor. And we check again that the breath isn't being held, and gently lower the right foot down, and the left foot lifts above the floor, without increasing the arch in the lower back, without tensing the abdominal area, chest, or neck. The left foot is over the floor. And very gently, using the pads of the fingertips start making small circles, slowly moving toward the center. These are barely noticeable circles, but still quite perceptible for the shoulder girdle. the left foot is above the floor. And here, check whether you've started arching your lower back, or if your shoulder girdle is lifting off the floor, or if you're starting to tense the front wall of your abdomen, right? Are we starting to tense up the abdomen? Is our rib cage still expanding outward to the sides? And gently, the left foot comes down to the floor, and we continue, at our own comfortable pace, to slowly lift the right foot and lower it back down to the floor. Then, we lift the left foot and gently lower it to the floor, all while our arms are making these smooth, circular movements. And now, what we did while staying still, when we paid close attention to lifting the foot off the floor and lowering it back down, we're now combining that with dynamic movement. This way, the body and the nervous system can gain experience with this kind of dynamic action. Basically, we're always either walking or doing something, so these internal connections should stay free, not just when we're lying down or sleeping. Whether we're going to the store, rushing to work, taking the subway, doing this or that, heading to the kitchen, or even dancing. Here, this internal connection should also be functional. From the outside, these are simple movements. The arms rotate in the shoulder girdle. One foot is placed on the floor and lifted, the other foot is placed on the floor. It might seem like nothing special is happening. In reality, these are basic patterns. If we think about it and start deconstructing some of our more complex movements, this pattern is there. That is, our legs alternate, and we have these mobile arms. And the main idea is that all these movements, the patterns in the feet, the patterns in the hands, the patterns in the legs, are just an invitation to observe the arch in your lower back, the curve in your neck, to see how much you can avoid increasing them, and to pay attention to your breathing. The back of your head is still melting into the floor. Are we, by any chance, starting to lift our head? Again, I'm talking about just a few millimeters here, or rather, the intention to lift, and instead of holding your head slightly above the floor, try to let the back of your head drop into the floor. Are we starting to lift our shoulders off the floor, especially when we begin working with our arms? Are we, just in case, starting to hold our shoulders up? Because, for example, we might develop a pattern like that. How does that happen? The arms are supposed to be free, so that must mean the chest has to be tense, right, in order to free up the arms. No, let's try to rethink that. Again, the shoulder girdle should be as conductive as possible, right? This segment, from the left shoulder to the right shoulder, should melt into the floor, inviting the shoulder joints to melt as well. But as soon as we start melting the shoulder girdle into the floor, there might be a tendency to compensate by holding tension in the lower back. For example, we might free up the arms by relying on the lower back for support, in this case, while lying down. And, accordingly, this is also a way for us to check how much we are not increasing the arch in the lower back, how much this bridge between the sacrum and the shoulder girdle remains relaxed. But at the same time, this holding can shift into tension in the abdominal area. Again, we're talking about minimal amounts here, more about tendencies. Precisely because we're making minimal movements. No, and our lower abdomen isn't getting overly tense either. And while maintaining the circular, rotational movement in the shoulder joints, we simply change its direction on the count of 3. And when you hear the count again, 1, 2, observe whether this somewhat incorrect preparatory pattern for some action appears again. In other words, are we already starting to hold our breath on the count of 1 or 2, because at that moment of redirecting, we feel like we need to tense something up or hold something in place? No. The goal, on the contrary, is to remain relaxed, to keep the muscles as conduits, to let the breath flow freely. And when we get to 3, again, will we fall into that familiar habit, the usual tension in the lower back, in the neck, and the usual holding of the breath? On the count of 3, we simply start rotating our shoulder joints in the opposite direction. 1, 2, 3. And the arms move in the other direction, so to speak, away from the center. Just observe, once again, how much tension there is in your legs, how much, your nervous system was ready not to tense up your legs. Keep doing these rotational movements. Gradually start increasing the pace of your steps, the changes of your feet from the floor, and notice that this doesn't lead to extra tension, especially in your hands. That we're not starting to our biceps, triceps, or the muscles around our forearms. Are these muscles starting to tense up more because we want to free up our legs and add more speed? And again, make sure your lower back isn't arching, your neck stays relaxed, the back of your head is still melting into the floor, and your key joints are melting into the floor as well. Now let's really pick up the pace in your feet and gradually accelerate to your own maximum speed. So basically, we keep doing these little stomping steps all the time, and gradually we move toward our own maximum for today. Not someone else's maximum, not some external ideal of a maximum, but just seeing how far we can push this topic ourselves. And we keep going, and little by little, we start to pick up speed with our hands. And we have maximum speed in the shoulder area, in the shoulder joints, and maximum speed in the hip joints. Let's remember, we have balls in our hip joints, rails in our knees, balls in our ankles, and balls in our shoulder joints. And here, once again, we check whether we've lost the sensation of the back of the head dropping toward the floor. And here, let's just come back and refresh that sensation in our fingertips. Are our fingertips still inviting our arms to reach out toward the ceiling? And when you hear the count of 3, we'll change the direction of our arms again, and simply notice whether we have to slow down. Yes, can we renegotiate in motion? 1, 2, 3. We change the direction of our arms. Maximum speed in the feet. Maximum speed in the shoulder joints, not by tensing outside. The shoulder girdle segment approach the floor, the sacrum touches the floor. Now once again, the number 3 will be called out. This time, with one hand, one shoulder joint rotates the arm inward, the other rotates it outward. The right shoulder rotates the arm inward, the left rotates it outward. 1, 2, 3. And especially in this position, pay attention to whether you're not shifting to holding with your lower back, and notice any changes in your feet. And again, on the count of 3, we'll switch directions. Now the left shoulder joint will rotate the arm toward the center. The right shoulder joint rotates the arm outward, away from the center. We're working with exercises minimal in form, but for the nervous system, for some, it's already like, whoa, what's happening? From a psychophysical view, these are basic patterns. Again, we're renegotiating with our nervous system, with how hands and feet interact. 2, 3, and we change direction. The lower abdomen stays empty, even if you want it. And now, every time you hear the word change, we switch any direction in the shoulder joints to any other direction. Change. Both arms can move outward, inward, or each can move differently. Everyone chooses which area they want to work on. Same. And slowly we start to lead, again, not by tensing the outer muscles, but by going through this process of renegotiation, change in the shoulder joints. The fingertips keep encouraging the arms to reach toward the ceiling. The left shoulder joint drops toward the floor. The right shoulder joint drops toward the floor. The back of the head melts. The sacrum melts into the floor. The shoulder girdle melts into the floor. Change. And slowly we increase the distance from the feet to the floor. Hip joint mobility. At the same time, there is no increase in tension in the glutes or thighs. Any potential for increased tension is redirected into the sacrum. Change. And throughout all this, breathe freely. Keep breathing relaxed. Abdomen fills. Rib cage opens. That's the point. The neck lets air pass freely. The back of the head melts into the floor. The sacrum melts into the floor. The shoulder girdle as well. Change. Gradually, this is about reaching the maximum speed of the shoulders, the maximum speed of the hips, and the maximum range of motion in the feet. Again, this isn't about the abs. On the contrary, the front walls of the abdomen are calmly circulating, filling up, settling down. Change. And little by little, we accelerate to our maximum. Now, you won't hear the word change anymore. Everyone decides when to switch direction. The main idea is to minimize tension in the outer muscles, to refine this interaction of the sacrum with the floor, the shoulder girdle with the floor, the back of the head with the floor, and to make our breathing permeable. In other words, the front wall is permeable instead of having a tense abdomen, and the rib cage is open to the sides instead of being locked up and without accumulating tension in the neck. We'll do this for literally half a minute. Increase the speed from the feet, the hip joints, the speed of rotation, and make conscious changes in direction. Keep going. Change, change. Shoulder joints just a little more. Again, this isn't forever. Now you'll hear numbers from 1 to 10, and when you hear 10, we'll stay where we are, we'll stop. Both hands will be pointing up at the ceiling with the fingers, the shoulder joints sinking down toward the floor, and the feet above the floor. The knees will be as close to the torso as possible. 1. Keep circling. Pay attention to your sacrum, your shoulder girdle, and the back of your head. 2, 3, 4, 5. What else can we try? What else can we uncover? How's our breathing? 6. The shoulder joints are sinking down. The sacrum is sinking down. The back of the head is sinking down. The glutes aren't involved. The thighs aren't involved. 7. The back of the head is melting into the floor. 8, 9, and 10. The fingertips are pointing at the ceiling. Feet are above the floor. And really focus on the idea that our knees are gently melting toward the shoulders. The left knee joint is melting toward the left shoulder joint, and the right knee joint is melting toward the right shoulder joint. Again, here, if we feel any tension building up in the hips, sacrum, or back, instead of letting the tension accumulate in the hip, we can imagine the tension moving into the sacrum, and the sacrum calmly releasing it into the floor. Now, gently, the fingertips guide both hands toward the feet. Go through this path in as much detail as possible without blocking your breath, so that your palms end up on the floor. Place your palms on the floor with your feet above the ground. The left shoulder joint invites the left knee joint toward it, not through external force. The right shoulder joint invites the right knee joint toward it. Again, check this triangle. From the left shoulder joint to the right shoulder joint, this segment, the clavicular belt, melts into the floor, and the sacrum melts into the floor as well. Any attempt to hold yourself up with your abs, redirect that effort into the sacrum, shoulder girdle, and back of the head. Now our 4 zone. The back of the head melts into the floor without accumulating tension in the front wall of the torso. And now, carefully once again, you will hear the numbers from 1 to 10. Without losing the melting of the sacrum, shoulder girdle, back of the head, and feet into the floor. Really take your time. Spread out this count from 1 to 10. Go through it as thoroughly as possible, and become aware of every intermediate stage. We're going to do this slowly and thoroughly precisely so we can become aware of where we tend to arch the lower back, or lock up the rib cage, or do something else, where we have the habit of engaging these external holding patterns. Try to redirect these external tensions into the shoulder girdle, sacrum, and the back of the head. So from 1 to 10, lower your feet to the floor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Don't arch your lower back. Don't increase that arch. Don't clamp your rib cage. Instead, focus on the shoulder girdle. 8, 9, 10. And let your right foot and left foot rest on the floor again. Let your nervous system absorb this experience again, and really let the weight sink into your right foot, then into your left foot. Ross.
the shoulder girdle, the back of the head. Again, if you feel any slight fatigue or if any tension has built up, let it melt away through these areas. Breathing circulates calmly. And let's bring the tip of the nose into focus. Breathe and observe. Right foot melts into the floor. Left foot melts in, sacrum, shoulders, back of head. Abdomen fills, rib cage expands as you inhale. The cervical. This cervical tube calmly lets the air pass through. And on your next exhale, gently invite the tip of your nose toward your right shoulder. That is, the head turns to the right, but at the same time, notice that this movement happens between the shoulder girdle, the part that's melting into the floor, and the tip of the nose. And gently invite the tip of your nose to the right throughout. Keep having a dialogue with yourself, renegotiating. When you reach what feels like your limit, just stay there for a bit, without losing that sense of invitation. The tip of your nose nudges your head to go a little more to the right. Any tendency to accumulate tension in the neck, we redirect again into the shoulder girdle and the contact of the head with the floor. In other words, any holding in the neck, we distribute between the sacrum, this triangle we talked about, the sacrum, the shoulder girdle, and the back of the head. Bring the tip of your nose toward your right shoulder. And again, the front wall of the abdomen fills calmly. On the inhale, the rib cage gently expands to the sides. Invite the tip of your nose to the right, without forcing yourself from within. In this position, notice you can avoid getting carried away. There's a tendency for the tip of the nose to go right, but also the sacrum invites us back. There's the shoulder girdle, which also invites us back. Release the abdomen, release the rib cage, release the sacrum, the pelvic area. And on the next exhale, invite the tip of your nose to the left, toward the center, so that the tip of your nose is pointing up at the ceiling. Once again, go through this path in detail, negotiating with any tension in the neck or the back of the head. Or notice how this resonates, say, in the pelvis. The tip of your nose is pointing at the ceiling. On the next exhale, invite the tip of your nose to the left. And again, when we've reached our so-called limits, keep inviting the tip of your nose to the left, but maintain a connection with your sacrum, your shoulder girdle, and the areas where your head touches the floor. In other words, all these important areas should keep melting into the floor, and any tendencies to hold tension that start building up in the body should be released, bringing our focus back to these four zones: the contact of the head with the floor, the segment, and the sacrum. And here again, keeping the tip of the nose moving left, we pay attention to whether our arms are starting to hold themselves above the floor, or if the key area, the shoulder girdle, is beginning to lift off the floor, or if there's a slight tendency for internal holding. Again, invite the left hand into the floor and the right hand into the floor. What else can we notice in the body thanks to this invitation for the tip of the nose to move to the left? And on the next exhale, we look into it and invite the tip of the nose back to the center. Observe your breathing and trust your intuition. If you feel you need to adjust your position, move your head a bit, shift your ribcage farther from your pelvis, or make any other adjustment your body asks for, or if you need an extra breath, just calmly allow it. Now, focus on this connection. Pay attention to the link between your sacrum and the tip of your nose. We're establishing this internal connection from the sacrum to the tip of the nose, and without losing this connection, with the next exhale, we latch onto the breath, like catching a wave, and direct the tip of the nose to the right. Now, notice where you can let go of, what micro holdings or tiny tensions exist in your body between the sacrum and the tip of the nose. Maybe it's something in your neck itself, maybe it's in your shoulder girdle, maybe it's in your abdomen in general, or maybe it's in the sides of your abdomen. And the tip of your nose keeps moving to the right. We're constantly maintaining this internal connection from the sacrum to the tip of the nose. And now, as you keep the tip of your nose reaching to the right, at the counterbalance of the sacrum, which is always reaching toward the floor, not due to the buttocks, not due to the muscles, thighs, but the sacrum is constantly inviting this internal connection down to the floor, while the tip of the nose invites this internal connection to the right. And between these two internal invitations, we start to unravel the external holding, really tracking this mutual duality, the sacrum toward the floor, and the tip of the nose to the right. And this internal connection, this internal line, so to speak, what can it offer to the external holdings? How can it invite them to release? What is it that I can let go of? And without losing this connection from nose to sacrum, I move the nose to the center. And maintaining this internal connection, this imaginary internal segment, this inner line from the sacrum to the tip of the nose, I start shifting the tip of the nose to the left. Clarifying the invitation, the sacrum is constantly inviting this connection to sink deeper into the floor. The tip of the nose invites this connection to shift more to the left. And in relation to these two invitations from both ends of this connection, what can we let go of? Maybe something in the abdomen, in the holding, in the abdominal muscles, in the back of the head. Maybe something in the pelvis starts. We can uncover it. In the area of tension in the lower back, we might feel release, letting go in the lumbar region. The tip of the nose invites this connection to the left. The sacrum invites this connection into the floor. Again, for those who prefer a romantic example or something more natural, imagine a little worm inside us, with one end crawling toward the tip of the nose, or maybe like a little octopus and the other end, or say, a plant growing toward the sacrum. This growth in both directions, this lengthening, but not by forcing it from outside. Gently bring the tip of the nose back to center. And without losing this connection, slowly and gently start to increase the speed again. Tip of the nose to the right and center, and tip of the nose to the left and center. And do this at your own pace, not based on your own sensations, but all the time, yes, as much as we can gradually grow, including in terms of this speed. Gradually increase it so that this connection isn't lost, but on the contrary, becomes even clearer. So, against the backdrop of this plant, if this image resonates with you, inside us, with one end at the sacrum and the other at the tip of the nose, it continues to slowly grow in both directions without leading to these external tensions. That the hips don't accumulate tension, the abdomen doesn't accumulate tension, and the shoulder girdle and chest don't accumulate tension either. We keep sinking into the left foot, into the right foot, and gradually look for this tendency to increase speed. If someone looked at us from outside, they'd just see the nose moving right and left, the head swaying side to side. But we understand that what we're really working on is this, developing the connection that the sacrum is actually rooting even more into the floor, while the outer muscles are relaxing even more. And gradually, we bring this speed up to the maximum. That is, we try to maintain the depth of this connection. But again, we shouldn't become prisoners of the idea that deep means super slow. Again, civilization usually offers us fast speeds, and dances also offer us fast speeds. In general, life often presents us with fast speeds. And the question is, how functional and free can we remain in these fast speeds as well, on the one hand? On the other hand, speed, both extremely slow and extremely fast, also gives us this experience. What can we let go of against the backdrop of this fast speed? And when I count to 5, we will reach our maximum speed with the tip of the nose moving right and left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we continue to maintain this maximum speed. Again, not by forcing it externally, but by letting go, by having a dialogue with these internal connections. And when you hear the number 3, on the count of 3, your feet will start to lift off the floor, your knees will move to the side, the right knee will move toward the right shoulder joint, and the left knee will move toward the left shoulder joint. And this amplitude and the rolling of the head from right to left will remain, will continue. 1, 2, 3. And the knees lift off the floor, the tip of the nose moves from side to side, feet are above the floor, the right knee drops toward the right shoulder joint, the left knee drops toward the left shoulder joint, palms are on the floor, and the head moves from side to side. And we make sure not to overstrain the abdomen. Again, this inner plant inside us continues to grow further, through the sacrum into the floor, and through the tip of the nose out to the side, off into the distance, constantly lengthening the plant, making it more permeable. And again, breathe freely, letting go of any unnecessary tension, noticing and releasing it. And again, when the count of 3 is heard, the fingertips will start to guide the hands. The left fingertips will begin to guide the left hand toward the ceiling. 1, 2, 3. The tip of the nose keeps rolling over, and only the left hand starts to reach up toward the ceiling. The right hand stays on the floor. The knees keep falling into the shoulder joints, and the left hand will reach up toward the ceiling. And when the count of 3 is heard, the fingertips of the left hand will move toward the back of the head, so that the hand also ends up above the floor. 1. But now with the fingertips back there behind the crown of the head. 2, 3. And as thoroughly as possible, we move the fingertips and the hand behind the head. Move your head from side to side. And we go as far as we can until we feel that our shoulder joint isn't being forced, meaning we don't put the hand on the floor. So both feet are above the floor, and the fingertips of the left hand are also above the floor. And we continue this growth through the fingertips. And again, we check whether we're starting to hold tension in the lower abdomen. Now, continue refining the left hand's position above the floor, between the left shoulder joint and fingertips, without letting it drop. This is the active holding above the floor. Again, not a static stretch, but maintaining the connection between the fingertips along the floor and the shoulder girdle. We're still extending this connection from the sacrum to the tip of the nose, and on the count of 3, the right hand will reach a right angle. 1, 2, 3. The right hand moves up toward the ceiling, tracing this path as precisely as possible. Move the tip of your nose from side to side. And again, 1, 2, 3. The right hand goes behind the head, tracing this path as precisely as possible. This is really just about renegotiating how you hold yourself, learning something about your body, and discovering your own breathing. Now both hands go behind your head, both hands above the floor, and move the tip of your nose from side to side. Keep breathing for a little while longer. Now, let's renegotiate with the nervous system in motion. Arms along the floor, but not touching it. Reach out through your fingertips, as if you're growing beyond them. As you inhale, let your ribcage open, abdominal wall expand forward.
And now, when I count to 3, your feet will move towards and above the floor, alternating right leg, left leg, but on the count of 3, only the right foot will start. 1, 2, 3. Now the right foot goes to the floor and lifts above the floor, and again the right foot to the floor and above the floor. Both hands go behind your head, and the right foot goes to the floor and above the floor. The right knee brings the right foot to the floor, and the right knee moves toward the right shoulder joint. Both arms stretch out behind your head. This is already quite a complex movement. The left knee is still, as before, falling toward the left shoulder joint, let's say, to renegotiate. Again, on the surface, these are primitive movements, but for the nervous system right now, it could be an absolutely global reason to renegotiate these connections. Right foot on the floor, right foot above the floor, crown of the head moving side to side, right shoulder toward the left shoulder, both arms behind the head. And during this movement, the right arm reaches up vertically toward the ceiling. Sorry, not the floor. Right foot on the floor, above the floor, tip of the nose moving side to side. Now the right arm moves toward the foot. Right foot on the floor, above the floor, tip of the nose moving side to side. Maintain the maximum range of motion. And the right arm moves toward the right foot, also just above the floor. And on the count of 3, the left foot joins in. Alternating right foot, left hand behind the crown of the head, right hand by the side of the pelvis, and the tip of the nose moving side to side. Always refining as you go, right? This is the pattern in the nervous system. We renegotiate, track where we have those holding zones, where something is completely unfamiliar to our nervous system. Now, gently, on the count of 3, the fingertips of the left hand reach toward the ceiling. The fingertips of the right hand reach toward the ceiling, and the hands switch positions. Now the left hand goes by the side of the pelvis, and the right hand goes behind the crown of the head. Both hands are above the floor. The feet switch positions, and the tip of the nose moves side to side, and we keep switching the hands in different directions at random. The legs change direction, and the tip of the nose shifts from side to side. And again, the sacrum melts into the floor, the shoulder girdle melts into the floor. This is our triangle. Notice how we're not starting to rise above this triangle, but rather the opposite. Any attempts to hold on, any kind of stress, we redirect into the sacrum, into the shoulder girdle, into the segment, and the areas where the head contacts the floor. Let's stay in this position a little longer. And slowly, once again, if our speed is slowed down, which it probably has, let's just invite that speed to pick up. Speed up in the legs, speed up in the arms. Maximum speed in the arms, maximum speed in the legs, and maximum speed at the tip of the nose, while maintaining the work of these connections, right? Let the energy grow along the line of the sacrum. Let it grow through the back of the head. Let's invite our psychophysiology, our nervous system, into this wide-ranging, high-speed experience. Again, just allow your nervous system to stay in that state. This might feel like some kind of stress, or all those sensations, like, wow, how are you going so fast? It would be easier to understand and more useful if it were slower. Gradually, we let those feelings go and come into our own pace. This is our final acceleration. There's this pattern in the hands, a pattern in the legs, and a pattern in the head, and we try to make sure that one doesn't cancel out the other, but instead, we reconnect them, bring them together again. All these frontal patterns of the limbs with the periphery, and the beginning of the spiral in the head. The head is free from the spine. The shoulder joints, the hip joints. This doesn't lead to extra tension in the shoulder girdle. This section melts into the floor. The sacrum melts into the floor. And the area of contact with the floor as well, yes, calmly, also melts into the floor. This means that we don't transfer, don't shift the holding of the head onto the neck. Yes, so we don't create or add extra tension in the neck. I'll count to 10. On the count of 10, we'll stop. 1, 2. The nose moves side to side. The foot presses into the floor. Both legs are above the floor. Both arms are changing, creating this counter movement. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And when the very last number is finally called,
Both of our hands will be gently facing up toward the ceiling. Both feet will be resting comfortably on the floor, and the very tip of the nose will be softly pointing at the ceiling. And then 10. Both feet on the floor, fingertips pointing to the ceiling, tip of the nose to the ceiling. Again, let this static position be accepted. Let the nervous system settle into its posture. And again, what do we do with breath? The neck is relaxed, the chest opens up, the front wall of the abdomen is loose, not pulling on the lower back. Our triangle, sacrum, shoulder girdle, gently sinks into the floor. The left foot sinks into the floor, the right foot sinks into the floor, the back of the head sinks into the floor. And despite the external form, the external static shape, inside there is movement. Inside there are all these different parts. And an inner sense of free boundaries. And gently roll onto your side without losing this experience, without letting go of this skill. And stay on your side briefly and check, yes, that when we find ourselves in a different relationship with gravity, all those interconnections we've been establishing, clarifying, and releasing any holding patterns, that they haven't disappeared, that the body hasn't, that the nervous system hasn't shifted us back into a familiar pattern of holding. Despite the different effect of gravity on the body, we can maintain this lightness, inner freedom, and depatterning. And transition to a sitting position. This is another familiar way for us to interact with gravity. Just a little bit here too. 2, 3 for movements, maybe some different phases in your head, arms, and legs. And we check that in this vertical contact with gravity, we can also remind our nervous system that it's not necessary to fall back into old habits, that we can stay within these interconnections that we've just been working on. And here, just the same, the last thing we'll focus on is our breathing. That the arms, legs, and head, and on the inhale, the front wall of the abdomen and the ribcage still expand outward, and the neck freely lets the air through. Good. And that will be the final piece for our set. So our set has come to an end.